I wanted to start out, well, first I'll just say that we've known each other some time, and this is not the first public conversation that we've had. And I also, for a recent exhibition in 2022 at 500 Cap Street in San Francisco, Michael had a show there, and I had the opportunity to write the foreword to the exhibition catalog for that show, and I wanted to start out by quoting something that I wrote in that catalog. The show there titled "A Tree is a Tree." And I said that a viewer doesn't look at your work as much as question it. And it's this active experience of looking that feels like a central key to your work for me, that I think is very much at play in this exhibition too. Each of your works, which take a lot of inspiration from your own Buddhist practice, operate, for me, a lot like a Zen koan, right? These unanswerable riddles that practitioners of Buddhism use, they come in the form of deceptively simple phrases. But for you, these koans are deceptively simple objects rather than constructions of language. And I think that's true in the title of this show, too. It's sort of right there in "This is a line, this is not a line," which is borrowed from the Diamond Sutra. That's right.
Sure.
One of the most celebrated scriptures in Buddhism. This is a line, this is not a line, therefore it is called a line.
It's a paraphrase.
Is a paraphrase from that. But I'm also thinking about a line being the shortest distance between 2 points, right? Which in some way is the last thing that your work is, right? It's not a short distance, it's not sort of an easy cause and effect.
Right.
It's a twisting route. And that's kind of a conceptual trick to your work, I think, that it appears maybe with the simplicity of a line or many lines, but really it opens up onto something. But maybe even more so than your previous work, this really feels to me, this show, like it's pushing at the boundaries of perception and that duality between apparent simplicity and what's really underneath the surface. We've talked before about this idea of the beginner's mind in Buddhism and sort of a naivete that is really not the same as not knowing, but it's an openness to possibility, right? So I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about these key elements of perception that you were thinking about when you started putting the work in this show together, and maybe some of the things you were interested in challenging.
Sure. That's, to begin with, is very, very insightful way of looking at this show, continuing from what I did at Cap Street. Indeed, it is a continuation of that line of work, especially the thoughts behind the work. For that matter, I'm going to re-quote what you quoted, a tree is a tree. It is such a simple phrase, but for people who are familiar with Buddhism, that will practice Buddhism, it is kind of a summation of some of the more profound teachings of Buddhism. In this way, it's basically a tree. When you go out and see a tree, it really is a tree before you pay special attention to it, right? But then, for people like most of us, I believe, who have the tendency to try to understand things, to intellectualize things, then you get into this little complication of like, what kind of tree is it? Why do I call it a tree? How does it grow? All of those complications that has nothing to do with the tree itself. The tree may just grow or die. Okay? But we want to understand, so we become convoluted in our relationship to the actual tree. So the Buddhism came along and said, okay, there is a third phase about your relationship to a tree, which is if you really understand it from the Buddhist perspective, a tree is a tree. Okay? It is that they exist on their own terms. It is us who are complicating our relationship to the natural thing. Okay? So that's a summation of the philosophy behind all of my creation in terms of art, including all the pieces in this show. And from one particular angle, I could say, in response to what Max said, pieces, they look seemingly simple, but they are loaded. Before we started, Max actually just asked me about one of the pieces. It's basically a sand pile. Can I do this thing? Well, I'm not good with this thing. So basically, I'm going to describe in words. The sand pile, on top of the sand pile, there's this structure that is, how do I do this share thing? Never mind. That is actually a white sculpture in the form of lines. And the form of the white lines echo the form on the drawing on the wall. Okay. Now, the actual happening goes like this. I did the drawing first. It's about 12 inches by 16 inches. Line drawing. And then I noticed that at the right-hand corner, at the bottom, there's a particular intense color shape. It got my attention, so I thought, maybe I can use that to talk about something else. Okay? So what I did was I extract that part of the drawing and use whatever tools I have. I managed to laser print that part on acrylic. You know, acrylic, very hard material. And that becomes a mold for me. Okay? And then I really wish I had brought those things. Anyways, and then I cast using white silicone rubber from that mold. Okay? That's how that little white thing on top of the sand pile came about. So you don't have to know all of these things, but it intrigues you because it doesn't just show up because it's very complicated. So you have a sense that it's more than what meets the eyes. There's a lot more behind it. So that's pretty much my process of going from seemingly simple to maybe to something more.
It's interesting to me too, because what the experience of looking at your work gets for me is this really deep experience of questioning, perception. It's a real active experience of looking, but it's not violent in any way. The work is very welcoming to the viewer. And the way that you're able to get the viewer to arrive at that experience is not by any sort of complicated way of conveying even the material work that went into creating this sculpture. Like you said, someone could see all of that and know all of that, but it really materializes in a sort of effortless way, I think, ultimately. Something you were talking about just now about a tree is a tree and sort of the three phases of the tree reminded me of a work, a really seminal work of conceptual art, which is Joseph Kosuth's 1 and 3 Chairs. And in this work, Joseph Kosuth has a chair like you'd have there in the audience. Beside it is a photograph of a chair, and then on the other side is printed out the dictionary definition of the word chair. And they're all a chair, right? But maybe also, to take it a step further, none of them are a chair.
Right.
You know? And so I think it speaks to me directly to another piece that's in this show, which is the pipe. It feels like your version of Kosuth's 3 Chairs a little bit. Something that I'll describe the piece quickly. There's a photograph of René Magritte's famous painting, 2 pipes. Well, in a way, actually, you have 3 pipes, sort of like 3 chairs. You have this at the bottom, on the second pedestal, or the bottom pedestal, you have a small photograph of, well, probably a digital image of René Magritte's famous painting, Cécine Hot Pipe, and above it you have a small pipe that's been made in a replica of the pipe in the painting, which was a collaboration with Jacque.
And this is Dan.
Who you asked to make the text above the digital image of the painting. There is an email that you sent Dan asking him to do his best to recreate the pipe in the digital image of the painting in a physical replica. As I was mentioning before, it reminds me of Joseph Kosuth's 1 in 3 chairs. I was thinking also about just the title of this talk that we decided on, Seeing is Not Believing, which carries, in a way, it has almost a really religious connotation or sound to it, you know, about faith, right? But here, I don't think it's faith in God, at least not for me. It's about faith in reality. And that, you know, when you sit in a chair, that it will behave like a chair and catch you, or when you know, have a pipe, that it will perform like you think a pipe is. But I think that is actually a notion that your work is really interested in upsetting and confounding, because it speaks to this philosophy. What you see often isn't really what you see. And then, you know, on a further epistemological level, how is this linguistic naming of things sometimes intentionally misleading, you know? So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about this complication of reality and sort of that play and trickery that you're up to. And then also I'm just sort of wondering why that questioning of consensus reality, or forcing your viewers to question consensus reality, how do you find that to be generative?
Great. I'm glad to hear the word why, because I was talking with a couple of people here before this. For me personally, to go to a museum or gallery to see some work, to have a retinal impression of things, is not enough anymore. With the advent of conceptual art, really the shift have taken place to go from retinal to cerebral. You have to question why does the artist do those things? Because especially with the advent of the photography, it's a piece of cake to do something that looks exactly like the original. So to paint something to look like a dog, whatever, it's meaningless by itself. So that once that is established, then you have to ask, why does this seemingly serious artist spend his or her life source to do this thing? He or she must have a very compelling reason to do that. And that's where conceptual art can start to be understood, okay? Questioning why, which is what you just said. Why do I do this piece, for example? As an example, taking a step back from the title of the piece, of the show, this is line, this is not line. The philosophy behind that, for me, is really, how to say, by quoting the Diamond Sutra, it really is like when you see something that seemingly it's a pipe. Is it possible that it is actually not a pipe? Okay, so that sounds like it's an intellectual, silly exercise, which it is. Okay, but if you look at that exercise or do that exercise with a different intention, you might benefit from it. Okay, so a precedent of this kind of an intellectual exercise is what this work is referencing, Joseph Kosuth, and more directly, René Magritte, whose picture of painting that is. Okay, so that quest at that time, in my understanding, was a representation of a pipe. It's not a pipe. Okay, so that was the discourse that he engaged the viewers with. Now I use that as his historical reference to push the dialogue even further. So when you see an actual pipe, it's not a representation, like two-dimensional representation of a pipe. Can it be possible that it is actually not a pipe? So now how does one possibly benefit from this kind of silly exercise? If you look at it from the perspective of, say, the Diamond Sutra's way of looking at things, it can go something like this. this really, it does look like a pipe, so it is a pipe, right? But then why on the second sentence, I would say it is not a pipe? Because what you actually see is what we think of, what we call a pipe. It is that thing that we identify as what we call a pipe. There is no such a thing as pipeness of that object. It is human construct. Think of it. Okay? Even that is still a little bit too much. Then how do we benefit from it? The way I personally benefit from this kind of dilemma of perception is like this. The essence of what that thing, that object is that in a very highfalutin term, it's the emptiness. If you keep zooming in, what a pipe is, what it's made of, and so on and so forth. Very quickly, you will go to a point, including using the modern quantum mechanics. It is basically magnitude and all of those things that I'm not expert at. But it, in the same way, that it points to something that's so basic that you really cannot pinpoint what it is. Okay, that's in Buddhism's terms called void or emptiness. Okay, now for that you have to be really interested in that philosophy itself to benefit from it. How does it help like ordinary people like myself? How I relate to it is like this. It's very, very practical actually. The way I thought of the emptiness in this case is like this. It compels me to think of why can it possibly be not a pipe? It is a pipe. If you want to smoke, you can smoke it, right? But one particular angle is like this. How does it come about? Okay, so that's where the emptiness concept becomes practical. So the emptiness concept in the Buddhism terms is the void that's full of potential. It has not manifested to be a pipe yet, or what we call a pipe yet. It has the potential to become a pipe. Okay? And what we see as a pipe, it is because there are the specific causal effects that makes it come to be manifested as that shape, as an object. Okay? So that's why I went through all this cumbersome steps of printing out this picture of Rene Magritte's painting and email it to Jacque and say, please make a 3D pipe out of this 2D image, but make sure this angle is exactly like the original, okay? Because it's a two-dimensional image, so he has to use his own creativity to make up all the other information, you know, from the side, from the back, and all of those things. Why? Because that's the reason, that's the causal factors of why this particular object come into being. Without me prompting him to make this thing would not have come. Okay? So with that perspective, now you can see every single thing in this room, for example, this bottle of water, okay? There is no such a thing as like this water, it just manifests by itself. There is no such a thing. First of all, somebody has to think of this plastic bottle, right? And whoever thinks of that plastic bottle has to figure out how to make plastic, okay? And how to make plastic in this particular shape so that it holds water. All of these things is related to each other. So that's the my understanding of a typical cliche. Everything is interconnected. For me, it is as real as can be. It really is, everything is interconnected. There is no such a thing as this thing is a bottle of water. I hope I make my point a little bit there.
I think so, but it brings to mind the way that I think about it, which is following this, thinking of the same thing but a little bit differently or from a different angle as a writer, and always thinking about language and grammar. The way I think about it is sort of the verbing of objects. So a pipe is only a pipe if you smoke out of it. And by that same logic, many objects can become pipes that aren't, that don't look like this, right? Like you could hollow out an apple and, you know, smoke out of it. Or you could punch a hole in a beer can and fashion a pipe out of it or something. And those are sort of, or even like if you take the chair, I think this was an example that Joseph Kosuth used. You take the chair and you pick the chair up and you use it to drive a nail into the wall.
Right.
Well, then it's a hammer.
Right.
It's not a chair anymore, right? But it becomes that object through its activation, the way that we choose to activate it. Like with the bottle of water, I was looking at the cups of tea that are here in front of us, and I was thinking we talk about when you say cupping your hands to hold water.
Right.
Well, that's the verb of that noun, which is a cup, right? And you're creating that same object. And these are all sort of benign examples, like cups and hammers and pipes and things. But I wonder if it can be extrapolated to arrive at some really radical potential. Like what if we start to reimagine structures that govern us, things like that. And the way that you come to it, I think, is thinking about interconnectedness, which, if you really consider interconnectedness at sort of not just the granular molecular scale, but at like the human scale, that really starts to undermine a lot of contention that I think we experience in day-to-day life, right?
Yeah, more than that, I think I agree, and extrapolate that specifically to art creation context. Then, what's the point of creating specific imagery or object in art, right? Knowing that it's all void anyway. Why do we still engage in doing all of these things? And that's where I personally benefit from a layperson's term of understanding one of the key concepts of Buddhism. And in Chinese, it's called 熟谛 与真谛. 熟谛 means that it's almost like a factual or scientific truth. Okay? Now, scientific truth of metal is whatever, the element table and so on and so forth, right? And then when you get to the bottom of it, because it is made out of iron, so it's more dense, that's why it can hold this shape and so on and so forth. That's the kind of, loosely speaking, scientific truth of things, okay? But Buddhism, the teaching is that there is a truth beyond that, which is what I just tried to explain, the void, the concept of void, because the metal, the scientific fact of scientific truth of metal is not the end result, end explanation of it, because once you keep zooming in, then eventually you end up at the void concept. So to come back to the question I posed for myself, so then why do we still bother to do all of these things? Because we can only dwell in a certain realm at a certain time. So most of us, when we're born, we don't do anything, we just exist, right? And then we learn things, and then we acquire knowledge, and then we want to construct things and all of those things. It is because we dwell in different realms throughout our growth, right? And it is not inconceivable that there are people who proceed from there to go to a higher realm. I have witnessed some people who are really achieved Buddhist practitioners. They really relate to the world in such a way that make me feel that, wow, these people relate to the same things that I deal with and complain about on a daily basis with such ease. I don't know if I should mention his name. I will, because he's such an important person to me. Basically, I was extremely fortunate to make acquaintance with an old gentleman by the name of Bill Porter. Such a wise person. I met him when he was 81 years old. I was on a quest to find a Zen master to help me study, and I ran into him without going into details. He, in my mind, became the Zen master that I happened upon. He refused to be my master, okay? Because he took me to a bar, okay? We just kept drinking Manhattan, for example. As soon as we got in, he said Manhattan to the waitress. Okay, this guy is a good sport. So we parted ways because the bar had to close at 2 o'clock in the morning. Okay, so we connected in that way. The reason I brought him up was that he really, for me, really is the embodiment of that kind of a way of existence. He wasn't making effort, like to teach me Dharma and so on and so forth. the whole time I was feeling like I'm learning stuff from him. Okay? So eventually, toward the end of the bar experience, I blurted out. I'd say, hey, Bill, I feel like you're not teaching me anything, but I'm learning a lot. At which point, I really felt like his eyes brightened up. Probably he was like, okay, this guy really is benefiting from being in the presence of him. So those people do exist in my own personal experience. They do embody a certain teaching that is at a different level of realization in this regard.
It's interesting because hearing you talk about sort of these levels or realms of consciousness, something that I can't help but think about returning also to this idea of the world sort of being made out of the way that we speak it into existence, the way we ascribe names and language to objects and things, to differentiate things from each other as one sort of really elemental use for language. That's something we don't have when we're born.
Right.
We exist in, there's a French linguist, Jacque, he considers that pre-linguistic phase of childhood development to be the real with capital R.
Mm-hmm.
That's like this, the way he describes it is everything is sort of one continuous ocean, because you don't have language to differentiate your body from the chair, from the floor, from the pedestal. So it might as well be all one flowing contiguous field. And so I wonder, when you talk about, sort of leveling up into a higher realm of consciousness or understanding, I wonder if it's actually finding a way to not level up, but level down. And return back to something a little more elemental. Like I'm thinking about the zooming in you were talking about, where everything is, you return to that sort of emptiness.
Right. If I understand it correctly, then the parody in Zen Buddhism goes something like this. There is a concept called the original phase. It sounds like it's what Lacan would say, the child existence is very, very close to that original phase concept from my understanding. It's also what we talked about last time, the beginner's mind. You don't have any preset of things, right? Pre-language concept of things. So that's one thing. Second thing that I could relate using the Zen Buddhism's way is like this. When the Zen master was asked, how do I practice, how should I practice or meditation and whatnot, the answer was, when I'm hungry, I eat. When I'm sleeping, I sleep. That to me is as funny as facetious might appear. It really, really is the truth of the Zen teaching. The challenge is it's very hard to achieve that.
Right.
Because we have so much, cumbersome education and conceptualization that's bothering us from getting into that original state that's very free, very close to the truth of things, But that, to me, comes very close to what Lacan seems to be describing, the original state of things.
I think that's right.
Right? So, and I try to practice that myself, including making this kind of work, by intentionally, how should I say, confounding, using your word, confounding people's experiences so that they have an opportunity to go to question themselves why they automatically go into that conclusion without questioning it. And that questioning is really, as an artist, my intention. I don't want to teach you this is landscape or whatever. It has no meaning, Even for myself, it has no meaning. But if by doing this, it makes you question how you look at this thing. Why do I automatically think this is a three-dimensional thing? And more than one person has told me, how did you do this with just lines? I said, I have no idea because I didn't intend it that way. All I intended with this one is this process is interesting to me being Michael as a person who happened to practice meditation, and I use that same practice to do this drawing. And probably with this is a good opportunity for me to describe how this process took place.
Yeah.
So the only thing intentional that I did with this piece was this. Was the very first line on the top of the left edge. Okay, so I drew a vertical line as far as my wrist can go. without lifting my wrist. Okay, that's all I did, intentionally. And then everything after that went like this. And then I drew a second line with the same twist and turn, basically copying it, but overlapping the first line by a little bit. So all of a sudden, I got 3 different things there now, and of 2 different shades, because the ink has one more pale kind of gray tone, but the overlap has a thinner but darker tone. Okay? So, and that's all I did. Go from here to up there. By the time I got here, something happened to my muscles, whatever. It introduced a variation. It's not as straight anymore, so it became like that. And then, of course, everything after that copies that as well. Everything here is like that. It has nothing to do with me intentionally being facetious. Of course, I was the executor of that gesture, but I wasn't really trying to do it so that it ended up with any way. Nothing to do with that. This is how it ended up. So this is my way of understanding what I was trying to convey. If you let go of your intention, what will happen? And this happened with this piece. Okay? And in terms of confounding people, it has a kind of confounding effect because why does this guy do this to me, right? It's like making me confused about things, right? So confounding probably could speak to the effect of some of my work, but as an intention, I think somebody else when they wrote about my work used the word singe. I think it's quite proper in that I don't have the intention of like, okay, what could I go through so that people have this feeling of being singed so that they can look at things about themselves, about how they themselves look at things. That is intentional.
I think one of the ways that you do that is through humor.
Right.
You know, it doesn't make a viewer uncomfortable. It's not antagonistic, but it is, well, like a joke, I suppose. It has that sort of way of pricking someone into some sort of awareness. I wanted to talk also about another drawing that's in the show, which is Drawing with Hummingbird, which is on the center of that wall behind the audience in the room. It's that drawing in the spotlight there. This was great, talking about your drawing process a little bit, which the background of this drawing follows that same or a similar process, I imagine, of line making. So I wanted to ask a little bit about like the material, the practice. You're not only questioning perception in this show, but I also think that a big question for me in this work is the tradition of art making and sort of pushing against that and interrogating that a little bit. Of course, your work is conceptual in nature, and we should say too, for people who don't know, you do all sorts of things. Performance, installation, photography, drawing, video, sculpture. Some of those things are in this show, some aren't, but at the same time, it feels to me like in this show, it's questioning traditional forms of art making the most. And that's not to say that you are engaging in those traditional practices, but it feels to me very much about drawing. And what could be more formative and inherent to the history of art than making a line on a piece of paper with an implement, right? Or even like you have these drawings over here. I mean, they're photographs, but I would call them drawings. Where you're drawing in cream cheese with a butter knife. But I think that a common distinction between drawing and painting that a lot of art historians use is that drawing is about lines, whereas painting is about tonal values. And the best paintings, actually, if you look closely, do not have any lines in them. They just have shapes, forms, colors that are placed beside each other in such a way to create the illusion of form. But they do so without any lines at all, right? And I do know, not to put you on the spot, that you started out at art school as a painter and left the department quickly. Well, you admitted that to me, that you
they kicked me out.
You got kicked out. Even better, right? That's even better. But I'm curious about how this process of painting or drawing has developed into the work that we see here here, in our last conversation, I brought up landscape painting because of the sort of topographic
and this
appearance
one
of these. For me, there's a large scroll behind the audience here that is itself not a drawing, but uses elements of some of these other drawings.
Got it.
Nice. Yes, there we go. You talked, and I brought this up. You said that Chinese landscape painting was inspirational, but at the same time, I'm trying to remember exactly what you said. You said it was an inspiration, but actually had nothing to do with it, which is a great sort of duality, right? So I'm curious just how your thinking has evolved. The last time we spoke about this was shortly after you had made this work.
Yes.
That was maybe a year and a half or 2 years ago now. So I'm curious about how your thinking about drawing and painting has evolved, and sort of getting a little more specific into this process. You talked about how you do it, but is the actual experience of it like meditative for you? Is it oriented towards any particular outcome? You said, people said, well, how does it look like this? You said, I don't know, I wasn't trying. So I'm curious if you can talk a little bit more about that intentionality and this evolution of your painting, so to speak.
Yes, I will. How do I go back to the Zoom?
Yeah,
All right.
click and
Okay. So, that's a good question. Let me think about it and see how I answer that. For me, lines or drawing, the practice of drawing is entirely different than the practice of painting. In that drawing for me is so immediate that my relationship to drawing is that it is my tool for thinking. To think visually, I go immediately to drawing.
I think
would
many artists probably
right?
do this.
Probably to you go to words, right? So
Yes.
for me, it's like it's a given that I started drawing things and bring things out from my thinking to line. So that's first step. In terms of how I went from lines to drawing to these work, it's really roundabout way. I went from painting to, I was kicked out, like I said, to a sculpture department because I started to put actual objects on my canvas. So the professor said, Michael, maybe sculpture department. And over there, I was showing way more interest in the process of making a sculpture. I still remember the first class of ceramic class when the professor was introducing the materials. I was just fascinated by, the clay comes in block, right? And to cut it into smaller pieces, they use steel wire. So I was doing this, and if wow, this is like a cutting butter with a hot knife. It looks. I just love that sensation.
It's very satisfying.
I know, it's so satisfying. I just kept doing those things without making actual objects. Okay, and then pretty soon my professor said, maybe you should try the new genres. That's how I ended up at new genres and the performance and this kind of weird kind of things. And all of these weird practices have something in common in my own experience, is that they're all very conceptual. I have an idea first, and then I go about investigating to find the right form or the right material for that specific idea. So over time, I found that I have different kinds of ideas, and they call for performance, drawing, photograph, video, and whatnot. So are the works in this show. They all come in different ways. So you pointed out that there's a series of photographs here. They really, for me, I don't think of them as photographs. They're just like, okay, I have this idea. The way that came about was, if I could go back to the sharing thingy.
The green, yeah.
The green thingy. I'm glad you see the front row. Okay, so let's take one of these. Okay, so the way how that series of photographs came about was that I was traveling and I was having breakfast. And, cream cheese, and in this case, peanut butter, I think, I tried to smear something. And I noticed that the little block on the tip of my knife have lines in them. Okay, so I was doing a lot of lining at that time. So, oh, this is interesting. So that becomes a work because I paid attention to the lines. And how do I make that into a piece of work? I repeat them. I have more than one such thing. That's intentional. So once I have an intention of this thing, I have a series of 4 of them. They each have the same gesture, have the similar lines on them with the same black plastic knife. So that to me is one way of talking about, okay, I not only can draw lines with a pen, I can also draw lines or talk about lines using a plastic knife. That's how I think of these things, and that's how I tie them together.
When I was thinking about these drawings, I was also thinking about the tradition in conceptual art and performance art of instructional art, and the idea that an artwork could be the work itself, but it could also be not just the concept, but the idea of actually how the work is made. Like you could tell someone could follow your directions for making this kind of drawing, and they would end up with the same result.
Well,
or an entirely different result, but through the same process.
That's impressive because yeah, actually happened during our opening.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I'm going to show you a picture because instead of the regular wines and bottle and the beers and so on, so they were scooping the ice cream using a plastic now, just like in the picture. So this is really typical example of instruction and performance. So I'm not really doing it, but people are inspired by they knew what to do. Everybody is excited for it, and people really had a ball. It's like no openings that I've been to. You guys with the plastic bag. So that's how the instructional performance came. But I just realized I forgot to respond to what you mentioned about the landscape thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that is very important for me for this series of work, because more than once after I'm done with the work, a lot of people say this is landscape, this is a tree ring, this is like a sediments on the terrains and so on and so forth. They're all related to that thing. And that's part of the reason why I made a paper about landscape. Okay, which is that piece, the one that I just showed. Basically, if you look at it from like a far away, I intentionally do this piece to have a kind of a oblique way of critiquing landscape, because people have been saying your drawings look like landscape. So now I really want you to believe this is landscape. If you look at it from far away, it is really uncanny. It's like the traditional Chinese landscape painting. Okay, specifically for Chinese-speaking people here, 青绿山水画, including the color, is exactly the same. But when you look closely, it's all lines. There's no shape that is anything to do with Chinese landscape. Okay, so I use this one because the imagery over there is similar to this one. So you can see none of the shapes are representative. They are just lines repeating each other. Okay, so that is my intention of critiquing the traditional way of looking at landscape. So is there another way of looking at something that looks like a landscape, Chinese painting, but it actually has nothing to do with it? And for that matter, I also intentionally use it as an installation. So for people who do speak Chinese, if you look at it from the side, it actually has a semblance to the Chinese character shan, okay, shanshui, and then it's flowing, it's water, okay, it's shanshui and painting. So it's like literally making fun of Chinese landscape.
Well, again, and that's sort of like 1 and 3 chairs, again, a little bit. You have the character,
yes,
and the water, and the landscape.
Yeah.
I want to use this piece also to ask another question. You know, we're talking about the drawings and the photographs with the butter knife. These are very, in a sort of a grand tradition of conceptual art, Bay Area conceptual art, super low tech, super low-fi.
Right.
Like make art with like a bottle of beer, you know,
Right.
like Tom Marioni, or like, you know, you put a microphone up to a piece of ice, and that's the, you know, the
My
sound
own
of,
mentors.
well, cost, that's the sound of ice melting, right? And you have these, like, it's really about getting to, getting away from the idea of art as like a fancy painting or drawing on the wall in a frame, and getting to the idea of art as an experience that's facilitated really easily and quickly in sort of this DIY, scrappy way, that makes it really egalitarian. Like anyone can do this, you know, anyone can eat the ice cream with a knife, and then you're doing art, or you're having an art experience.
Right.
But in this show, you described earlier the sculptural piece on the floor over there.
Right.
And maybe we have an image also of that one.
Yeah.
Perfect. This piece, in some way, and the scroll, and then the piece that you made with using the silicone mold as well, these pieces are, in some sense, higher tech, certainly, than like you just on your hands and knees with a
Right.
Sharpie.
Right.
But you were telling me before we started speaking publicly that they're sort of also low tech in a way, or still honoring that tradition. Something I can't help but think about, I live in San Francisco, and driving here to speak with you, I passed, you know, maybe 100 billboards for AI companies.
Yeah.
And so something that I'm, you know, is top of mind for many artists is really an issue of perception related to art and technology, which I'm just curious if there's anything there to tease out for you.
And actually, I've been thinking about this topic, in terms of the AI, because we are like squarely in the era of AI now, as we all know. So my relationship to the cutting edge technology is such that it's actually related to my own background. I actually came from science, and I studied computer science, and I worked as a computer programmer here for about 10 years at the early phase of the internet and so on. So one of the reasons I quit and switched over to making art was because that to me was too narrow. One can become excellent in one of the technology fields, but no matter how high you achieve, you can actually, I would say you can achieve very deep in that field, but it lacks the overall breadth of looking at the world this way. You can go like very good this way, but you have no chance of looking at the world this way. And that's what prompted me to quit technology and became an artist. In a very similar way, my current relationship to high tech is still like that, including my relationship to AI. It's one of I have to keep an eye on what AI is doing, okay? So much so, I actually have a piece. This piece is actually the original title of this piece is called DIY AI. Okay, I'm not making it up because I actually posted the first version of this thing on Instagram. It's still there. It's called DIY AI. Okay, it really, in my mind, is a critique on what AI can be, both good and not good. Okay, so what can I do to make people think in those terms, instead of just accepting AI as it is? You can go with ChatGPT and write an essay for you and so on and so forth, right? Those are all the good things, but it has its insidious side as well. It quickly overtakes your own thinking. So much so, it makes that side of your brain or whatever you have it kind of devolve. And that to me is very dangerous. So I had a double-edged relationship with AI. So for this piece, the way I speak to those issues is like, as in this piece, I took this 2 lines from that drawing that we showed earlier on. Why is it not coming up? Okay.
And this detail, that is maybe 1 inch. That's circled in red there.
Yeah, that's
Maybe
a little bit less than 1 inch.
Just
Yeah,
very small.
the distance. So I red circled the 2 lines in that drawing, and there are thousands of lines in that drawing. So the distance between them is probably 1/64th of an inch. So it's that close. So what I did is that I extracted these 2 lines, and I printed out super big.
And this is quite long, maybe
this
10
is,
feet or something.
This is 12 feet
Yeah.
long. Okay? So obviously it will blur and pixelate because I printed it up. So if I were really to do a high-tech piece, I would have hired someone who has a super fine machine,
Right.
who would literally blow this one up in high fidelity and say, look how cool all the details are, okay? But I'm not interested in that kind of thing because technologists are good at that, not artists, okay? As an artist, what I'm more interested in is like, okay, if I don't give you a straight up printed version of this pixelation, instead I painted the pixelation. So all of these pixelation effects, I hand painted them. Look at this. Every single square, I hand painted them. So you must give the artist some credit. Like, the guy seemingly is not stupid. Why is he spending all his time doing this stupid thing? And from there, probably you can contribute. There's a reason why you can look at this thing in a different way. That's one purpose.
Yeah. It's worth mentioning too, and people might already be able to tell this for themselves, but this piece that we were just speaking about, the scroll, and there's a video piece of a hummingbird as well, and then there's that piece on the floor that you described earlier. Those all sort of relate to and come out of that original drawing you did of the hummingbirds.
Right.
They remain independent from each other, even in this space. They're exhibited, with some distance between them, but it's very clear, especially once you speak about them, how interconnected they are. I couldn't help, I have to go back to your show at 500 Cap Street, which I'll just very briefly summarize, is a former deceased conceptual artist's home in San Francisco, David Ireland, which is now an artist residency. Michael had a brief residency there where he made work while visiting and staying inside the house. And all of that work, because you made, you were doing drawings on the walls and sort of installations in the corner of the rooms and such. All of that work couldn't really exist anywhere else than in that
Right.
house. And it was a really cohesive experience when you went in. Of course, you're in conversation with David Ireland and his legacy too. But you really had the experience being in that exhibition of cohesion. And in this show, having these 4 or 5 artworks that are all really in conversation, really, and even the photographs with the peanut butter and this line drawing, I feel again this real sense of cohesiveness. And I wonder how and why that is important to you, and sort of what that kind of interconnectedness gets at or speaks to. And I know this isn't the first time I've said that word. We brought up interconnectedness before, right? For me, at least, there's a way that the experience speaks to an invisible wholeness that I think our perception gets in the way of.
Right. Yeah, that's a very perceptive word. Better put than I could have myself. For me, the way I organized this show and also the 500 show was more intuitive. Loosely, eventually, when all the works came into existence, I realized, they are connected in this way. And the fact that it somehow feels cohesive as a whole to you, it's very reassuring for me. It speaks to my own doubt sometimes that because I make work using different mediums, so superficially it could look like, this guy hasn't made up his mind. Why is he using performance art and doing drawings and so on and so forth? But while at the same time, I'm dead serious in what I'm doing, and I know exactly what I'm doing. Okay, and that is the cohesive part. The connected part really is about perception. Every single piece that I've done since I have been doing work is really about, you can look at this thing this way. At the same time, you can also look at it this way. It's always like this. So in that sense, all the work here came from the same source. And that's what it has to do with what I tried to talk about a little earlier. Is like, how do we relate to the world? How do we relate to the phenomenon in the world? So that we don't just passively receive whatever is given to us. Instead, we can be more conscious in seeing things and relating to things. And I think that same source probably is why he has this cohesiveness like you mentioned. I hope so.
You know, the photographer Carrie Weems says that your whole artistic practice is just one idea, but you don't know what that idea is.
Right.
And it's in a locked box. And your whole artistic practice is just turning that box, looking for a way to open it.
Wow, that's profound. I love that. I love that. And that makes me feel, oh, okay. You know, that's some of the words that I've been looking for to describe my own practice. And now I have a sense of relief. It's, oh, okay, that's how it is. Because when you turn it a different way, it comes out differently. But the idea really is still the same. You know? And also it reminds one of my mentors who told me, I had the fortune to study with Xu Bing, some of you know. And he looked at my work and said, your work he has two things. One is that your work has your Changyi has Zen in it. Two, it's not mature because it's all in place. I was a student at the time. Is that eventually you will know this is your work by knowing that it is me. I think it's very similar to what you just quoted from the 100% black box thing. It really is that you cannot not do it that way because you have to be so honest to your work. It comes out as you because you is one person. It has to be that way. So I think there's a lot of comforting truth in that saying.
So my last question, and the big question that I have is, do you feel like you're at a point in your practice yet where you're starting to get an idea of what is inside that box?
I feel so. I think I feel it. I really do feel it. It's like sometimes I have a sense of surprise in myself. It's like, huh? Seriously, it's like, why does it keep coming out this way? I really do have that sense now. And it's very comforting. And I've been doing it for about 20 years and all the experimentation and so on. Sometimes, like I said, it's like performance, sometimes it's painting, sometimes video. Now I look back, it's actually coming from the same place. And it's a comforting feeling.
But having your own perception challenged
while
you're doing it and being surprised, that's
that's a good surprise. Yeah.
Well, we have time to take some questions from the audience here, and I think, I'm not sure if we can, but I think maybe we can even take questions from people on Zoom. But we'll go to the live audience first.
I have a question.
Yes.
Can I speak Chinese?
Of course, I'll translate.
我很喜欢你展示你这个山水画或者长卷的这种方法，是你自己的创作的想法，还是有人这样展示过？因为它也可以变成一个横幅贴在墙上。
Good question. The question was spoken in Chinese. I'm translating English first. So her question was, for this particular installation, she was asking about this piece. She likes the way it's shown as an installation instead of a straight up scroll on the wall as a Chinese landscape. Yes, that's intentional. No, her question was it because I created this form or somebody else showed Chinese landscape in this way? My answer is I don't know of anybody who has done similar installation, so I created it myself. But it's not a groundbreaking creation. It has something to do with what I described earlier. It is because I wanted to have this 山和水, okay, the water and mountain, because landscape, the English word landscape translates into Chinese is 山水 means mountain water, okay, literally that. So
very
I want
visual.
So I want to have the profile to be the character 山, and then the flowing indicates water. So it's just that.
让它更有立体感，而且有高低，也就是山水，让你更能体会到山水这个真实的景象。
She's coming in that because of this, it's three-dimensional and there's also has different variations of height and so on. It has this physical sensation of flowing and so on. Yeah, that is really intentional. It is because it's an installation, so I have to experiment the 3 supports, how far they are apart, how tall the tallest one is, how tall the second one is.
Very good.
Yeah, thank you. There was something else I wanted to say about it. I did try to hang the thing directly on the wall, and I think Max has seen it in the first time. I did have 2 smaller versions of this work. It's just a regular Chinese painting hanging on the wall. Okay, compared to this piece I was telling you, it's a piece of cake. It's so simple to do that. It's not strong word, so it doesn't critique much because it's making a drawing to look like a Chinese landscape painting. It doesn't have this like going all the way to critique that.
Yeah.
So that's why I make this piece. Good question.
但是我在那个I'm from Taiwan, and you know like Taipei is famous the National Gallery Museum, and in there once I saw the 清明上河图, right? It's a long scroll of the Chinese painting, and it just like lay on the wall across, you know, like so it doesn't like interfere my visual experience, but like this kind of installation, I really like it. It's very original, creative, but it's kind of like I have to compromise my visual experience. Like I'm missing some details. I have to like poke my head over. You know?
Right.
Yeah. So.
You can also look at it from the bottom.
Yeah. So sometimes like your installation is maybe a kind of trade-off. Like you want this, and then you lose that, something like that.
Right. Yeah, that's a very good point. I know that painting, Qiming Shangzi, is one of the very classic Chinese painting. And the reason I understand, the way I understand that, the way it's displayed in the National Museum in Taiwan is because its intention is to tell a story about that dynasty, Qing dynasty, how normal people live together and play outside, and so all the shops and it's full of details. So basically, it's like a long scroll, so you can walk past and then, this one is kids are playing, and so on and so forth. And some of the time, some other scrolls are displayed only with a portion of it at a time.
Mm-hmm.
So you can only look at this much, and then when you're done with the thing, you roll this one up, stretch another part. That's how that form of landscape painting is typically viewed. And I have no training in that, and I have no interest in doing that either. So that's why I choose this. This is what I'm interested in. So, yeah.
But I also think that experience that you described for people on Zoom, the woman who asked the question was talking about how the way that this is displayed, you have to sort of move around it and look at it from the side. You said maybe you could look at it from underneath, or we're looking at it from behind where we're sitting. That active experience of looking, physically active experience of looking, I think sort of mirrors the conceptual activation of looking, that you want viewers to sort of question how their relationship to a work of art conceptually and intellectually plays out, and by forcing them to have a similar physical experience with the work of art, it adds another layer to that.
Right. That's a very good point. And would it be okay if I relate back to another piece that's not related to this at all? But that topic is important to me. The topic of when a person goes to a museum and see things, what constitutes the art experience?
This is de Kooning.
Yeah, the Kooning. So for that intention, I spent one full day standing in front of de Kooning, the Rauschenberg, Robert Rauschenberg's work, but I stood very close to it, effectively blocking everybody from seeing that piece for one day. Okay. So
at SF MoMA, right?
At SF MoMA. And for people who are in the know, they know right away what I'm trying to do. Like you said, it's about de Kooning, because Rauschenberg himself, in his young days, erased a de Kooning drawing, and that became, in my mind, a seminal work for performance art, because the end result is not a work; it's the process of erasing a master, de Kooning's drawing. That's the piece. Okay, so for me, that issue is very important, because if we don't engage with the artwork actively, we just receive whatever is handed to us. It doesn't really, it's not that rewarding. It's just like basically you just check, okay, I've seen de Kooning, I've seen this one, and it doesn't really benefit you, it doesn't enrich you as much as it can. So that's why it's important. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Michael. My name is Diana. So my question is, you have the background of computer science and the early internet infrastructure. So how does that influence you in observe the real world and reality and structure your artwork?
Oh yeah, it's a question that I was asked often when I first quit, and so it's refreshing that this comes up again. It influences me in ways that you won't anticipate. It is actually, I go intentionally the opposite way. So all of my work, including the work that I just mentioned, the AI thing, I go the opposite way. I don't want to use it. The reason is directly related to because I have been very steeply inside it. I was doing this router programming at the very beginning of the internet, and so I know how powerful technology can be in terms of how it affects our life. But to do art based on technology, for me, I have not seen anything in the art that really take advantage of the depth of what technology can do. It really just borrow, say AI, it doesn't really talk about AI, they use ChatGPT to do something, you know?
Sort of playful or...
Yeah, you know, that's really, for me, is not the right way of benefiting from technology. So because of that observation, I stay away from it. Instead, I make work to critique that. Okay, so that's one. Secondly, in terms of my art creation process, I directly benefit from my experience as an engineer. I have a methodical way of planning things out. When I did my performances, some of them could be very dangerous, life-threatening. I did one piece where I had myself buried live. In the end, it culminated in my naked butt sticking out from the ground, nothing else. And nobody could tell if this guy is breathing or not, okay? And you know, I did that piece for 2 hours, and nobody can hold their breath for more than 2 hours, right? So, but I survived, and the reason I survived was because I had engineering methodology. So I had the whole complicated mechanism I installed underground before I did the performance, so that I don't get killed for doing performance. I love art, but I'm not ready to die. Trust me, it's not worth it. Yeah. So yeah, good question. Anything else?
Yeah, I have a question
Yes.
about this painting, and could you explain a little bit more about the way of the practice? So you're saying, you know, it's like performance, like it's unconsciousness, you know, while doing this. So, yeah, I just wanted to know better about your envision. Do you have anything envision the whole piece, you know, while you're unconsciously practice, you know? So that's the whole process. I'd like to know better.
Yeah, good question. First of all, I was conscious, but I wasn't intentionally drawing it to look like anything. So that's a direct question to a direct answer to your question.
Yeah.
So what it is that I could not. First of all, it was impossible for me to envision how this thing would eventually take shape, because I don't have control of the medium enough to do that. Because the only rule that I set for myself, that I follow religiously, was to copy the previous line. So with this rule, it's impossible for me to, copy the previous line, so that eventually it looks like a chicken. It's not possible. It's just not possible, right? Number one. Number two, it wouldn't be as meaningful as it is, because I think somebody else who practices Buddhism asked me this, like, okay, Michael, you talk about your practice of meditation and Zen so much, okay, how does it reflect in your work? Okay, so this one came up really very quickly. I said, okay, if you ask me this way, then I can think that the first thing I let go in making this kind of work is the self. I don't intend for this thing to look like anything when I did it. That's why it can turn out this way. Does it make sense? Because it turns out it's more interesting than how I would imagine it. You know, because I didn't know, oh, the line, if you keep doing it this way, had this capacity. See, I'm pretty full of myself. I believe I'm pretty imaginative. I wanted to look at it like this. And then with this kind of project, I realized my own scope of imagination is finite. So is most people. Picasso is very productive and so on. His imagination is still finite, right? And what this practice is interesting to me is that I don't know I could do this. It's beyond my finite set of imagination. That's why it's personally rewarding for me to do this. And getting back to the first part of your question, the process for me really is not about, okay, now these two lines are looking really good, have nothing to do with that, or these two rows. It is really about, it somehow keeps me in there without feeling any sense of tension or anxiety. It's like, is this going to look good, or how is it going to end up? None of that. It has this capacity of like me doing meditation through drawing lines like this. And for people who do meditation, probably you can relate. When you're in meditation, it really feels that way. It just drives itself, you know? And to do meditation in this way has an extra rewarding, which is in the end, it rewarded me with the end result. That's completely surprising every single time. I have some samples of the past works that's done in this way. It's just like, I have no idea how it's going to turn out, and each and every one of them turn out surprising. So I'm going to, for that matter. Okay, so for this one, for example, I call it Yu Gong Yi Shan. Chinese speaking people know. It's called a foolish old man trying to move a mountain. Okay, and the process is like this. Because I've done a bunch of these drawings already, so I said, okay, what can I do? It's almost effortless. So I just randomly do a dot, okay, on the paper. As you can see, it's off-center, so it's not intentional. So, and then I drew a circle around the dot. That's what I did. And I keep copying that circle. Eventually, it becomes like this. Okay. So eventual image, for me, is very, very rewarding and surprising, because I didn't know it could become such a mass. It has a force almost like trying to roll over, right? So all of these is kind of a testament to what I stumble onto. It's like, okay, if you let go of your intention, it could surprise you each time. And all of these have that kind of surprising effect. I don't know if that answers your question.